Hey everybody, it is Seth Apter here, back live on YouTube. I am here today with a special release from PaperArtsy. I always love to be able to share my new releases with everybody because what I know is that is the beginning of you getting an idea of what you might want to use and then you going forward and making things with what I'm releasing. And then I get to see the amazing creative magic that you all make. I want to welcome you. I am coming to you from my studio in New York City, and I am going to spend 1 or 2, maybe 3 minutes welcoming people, just so that more people can be here for the start of the live. If you're watching on recording, a big thank you as well. I want to thank right off the bat Janine, who is my team, and she is here. She'll be putting notes and links in the chat, and I love that she's here because she just makes life easier for me and for all of you as well. If you are watching, please let me know you're here. Leave a comment in the chat, say hello, let me know where you're from. And I welcome you all, even if I do miss some of you when the comment scrolls by and I'm focused on something else. But I do want to welcome Lily and Linda and Diane, Marie. I thank you so much. Hey, Michelle. I really appreciate that people are showing up. And the extra exciting thing about this release with PaperArtsy is that it's my biggest one I've ever released with them. And it's because I have 3 product lines. Many of you might have seen these things. They've been floating around online. I've done a couple lives already on Instagram and Facebook and in the PaperArtsy Facebook group. So you may have seen all this, but you get to see it live today if you're here with me. And I just want to make mention that everything I'm sharing today is for sale and available now. It's being sold by select brick and mortar and online shops throughout the world, and also in my online shop at sethapter.com. I'm so curious to see if this is new to you, what you love here. So send me the love when you like something and not so much when you don't. Thank you, Rhonda, for coming again. Hey, Debbie, great to see you. And yeah, I'll see you live in real life, live in February when I'm out in Arizona. Really excited to go out there and teach. Hey, Bev, great to see you. And I'm glad you caught a live YouTube. There will be more coming down the line. So we're going to do the 30-second countdown, and then I'm going to start sharing the products with you. And I love that there is actually a count up clock in the corner of my screen, so I can be sure when I say 30 seconds that it's really not 15 minutes, because that happens sometimes with me. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm pretty good at tracking those, and if I miss them, the ever wonderful Janine will make sure that I see them. All right, let's go. Let me share with you what I have. So PaperArtsy, if you don't know PaperArtsy, they are a manufacturing crew that are based in France. They primarily release paint and stamps, but they also have amazing other products as well. They had been originally based in the UK and moved their entire operation to France during the pandemic. I am so pleased to be able to design with them. And I release usually 3 times a year. And this year, I have my first release now. As I said earlier, it's all available. I want to share with you first the paint because I don't know, you can see in the back all my other paints from PaperArtsy. You just can't make anything without paint. That's my motto, among many. So I'm going to share with you the 4 colors, one at a time. The first one is olive. If you don't know PaperArtsy paints, they are fresco finished chalk acrylics. They dry fast and they dry with a matte surface. Because it's matte, it almost can be used like gesso. You don't need gesso. And any pen, any writing implement will work over it. And if you use it in a book or a journal, as soon as it dries to the touch, then it will not stick when you close your pages. That is one of my favorite things. They come in transparent, translucent, I should say, semi, and opaque. And you can always tell because A, they tell you, but B, they have that swipe of paint. And if you can see the chevrons there, It's all translucent, and all 4 of my paints are translucent. So this is olive, and what I really want you to note is that these paints look muted in the bottle. And my usual go-to is muted, but this is a little bit of a brighter palette. And this is what it looks like when it's painted out. This is on white board. Marie, you can use these paints on fabric, but they're not fabric paints. So for me, when I paint on fabric, it's because I am using a bit in my collage. I don't know, without adding some additive specifically for fabric, that you should put it on fabric that you are then going to, for example, wash and wear. But you can see how bright it is, and I love that. These are brighter than my typical line, and I really needed to add some brights because I now have 36 paints, and I want to make sure I don't repeat. So we got olive there. Next, after olive, we have a tomato, and I am loving tomato. Tomato is a red. There's no other way to say it, but it's just a red. It's also translucent, like all these paints, which make them perfect for layering in mixed media. And this is the red of olive. I'm sorry, of tomato. You know, you might think I'm making a salad because I have olive and tomato, but I promise you the salad vegetable names will change. This, by the way, is a bright but soft green with a little bit of a yellow undertone. And this is no other way to say it, it's red. The third in the release is Kiwi Gold. Kiwi Gold, I love this one. Kiwi Gold is like a secret sauce. It is perfect because it's translucent to use as a glaze when you wet and add more water to the mix. It just highlights all the colors underneath it. It's like an ochre yellow, and I love it. Whoops, particularly when it's painted out. You can see, again, a little muted in the bottle, but so bright and vivid. Kiwi Gold when it's on the white background. Now, a tip: it's not so easy sometimes to paint with translucents. Opaque paints are much easier to use. What I do want to make mention is that the darker your background, the less you will be able to see the color from the translucents. So if I painted this gorgeously vibrant yellow, Kiwi Gold, on a black background, you might think it would pop, but it would literally disappear. So be aware of that when you do this. Hey, Carol. Thanks, Nancy. So appreciate you are all here. Hey, Kathy. Thanks for joining me. So I'm just building up this palette, this beautiful palette that works so well together, but really works with a lot of other colors as well. Last one is Rusty. Who doesn't love rust? I mean, I guess there's some people who don't love rust, like maybe car mechanics. But, you know, most of my peeps are in love with rust. And Rusty is the orange end of the spectrum of rust. So this is not your traditional brown rusty, deep, dark brown. This is a bright orange. But it's not really orange. It's got a lot more flavor to it. So we are definitely going for rust. And again, these are beautifully bright in a light background. All these have been painted on white. And you can see just the palette together. I think they all work well together. I created this 4 quad paint set so that you can work with them as a unit. But again, they work really well with other colors as well. So if I can just go back here and I can grab, for example, my Blue Lagoon. I don't have it on a swatch, but you can clearly see how beautiful that color works with some others. So one of the things I love to do is I do love to make these swatches. So this is, I guess, a tip. And these swatches are pretty ample. You know, they're palm size. I love to swatch all my paints so that when I get a new one, or when I'm stuck, or I want to do something different, I can just throw all the swatches down, lay them out, and I can begin to match them up. Because sometimes there are matches that never in a million years would I have thought of, looking at all those bottles together. But as soon as I put the two side by side, I just get that they work. And again, I highlighted that this has a yellow undertone because it really, really works beautifully with the Kiwi Gold. All right, that's my paint. I'm not going to show you any samples with the paint yet because I need to show you my second product, which I put together in my art samples. So let's move on to tissue. I'm so excited that PaperArtsy is now producing printed tissue. Their designers will all have a chance to produce their own printed tissue. There's been 4 or 5 before me. I have patiently waited my turn, and I am thrilled to have released it now. So what is printed tissue? This is printed tissue. Printed tissue is a set of 4 sheets of tissue. All 4 are the same design. They are 30 inches wide by 20 inches tall. And every designer designs it their own way. When I designed mine and I saw the sample, I immediately named it because PaperArtsy doesn't name their products other than their wet products. I named this Bonkers because this is absolutely bonkers, and it became the theme of the collection, which is Go Big or Go Home. So what I've done is I've taken my stamps. I have quite a lot of them with PaperArtsy, and I chose certain stamps and layered them on tissue paper. And what we did was we changed the scale of the stamps. So all these represent stamps that are in my collection that are seriously much smaller, so that you can use the stamps with ink and you can use the tissue paper with a wet adhesive, layer them together, and you have some really interesting effects because you have different scale using the same designs, words, or marks. But the coolest thing is that, you look at this. This is a quarter of the sheet. So let me show you half of the sheet. And then let me show you the other half. And then let me show you from the behind, because when I show you from the back end, you actually don't see the words reversed. You can see it together. I can barely hold this in, but the size of these elements are quite large. And if you know me, you know that I tend to work small, but I love the fact that now we have shifted the scale. Now this is printed on white, semi-translucent tissue with permanent black ink, so that when you adhere it to whatever you're working on, your mixed media page, your collage, your journal page, your card, your scrapbook, whatever you're working on, the white of the tissue disappears and the black mark is there permanently because it's permanent ink. It doesn't smear or in any way move about the image. You won't lose it. So what I did was I used those tissues with my paints to create some samples, and that's what I want to show you now. Again, if you're just joining me, Seth Apter here. It's a new release from PaperArtsy. Everything is available now. It's available at my shop at sethapter.com. It's also available at select brick and mortar and online craft and art stores worldwide. All right, so this is B, and a lot of what you see is from the tissue. And what I did basically was tear different sections of the tissue and layer it. It's layered on using my translucent paints and also some a new product from PaperArtsy called Matte Tints, which is a tinted glaze adhesive. You want to go wet with the tissue. You don't want to use a very dry glue like a glue stick. You want to use something wet. The wetter it is, the adhesive, the more the tissue itself will disappear. But you can layer with paints that are translucent and create this effect. So this includes my Rusty. It includes my Kiwi Gold. It includes my Tomato. And it includes a touch of olive. This one primarily is Kiwi Gold. And it looks sort of greenish here. And That is just the tint from the bottle because, again, it might have a subtle green undertone, but it's really bright golden yellow. And then the tissue's there, but also some of my stamps from the collection, which I'll show you soon, are there, and there's some mark making. So that's B. All right, this is Unity. So exactly the same process. It has the tissue, it has my paints, it has my stamps, and it has some handmade marks. The things that I'm showing you now, they're very me. They're very kind of grungy and layerly and completely messy and, haphazard and lots of layers. If you look closely, you'll see some of the marks, you'll see some of the stamps, and you're going to see a lot of tomato. But there's also kiwi gold, and there's also rusty in here. I do not believe there's any olive, but I do love these paints because they really do work well together. But depending upon the amount you use and the way you layer them, you can get, again, using all same paints, you get a little bit of a completely different look. If you look right in here, you can see I used the tomato sparingly. Lastly, I want to show you now. Now it's done the same way. It's layers of the paint, it's the tissue, it's some of my stamps. There's a little bit of extra collage with those squares, but this one is primarily rusty. But I think if you look closely, you can absolutely see the tomato. And I'm hoping you can also absolutely see some of the olive. And again, I do have some kiwi gold there. And I love that. Again, one product, the 4 paints, using all the same ones, you get 3 different looks. Now, when I started to make samples for the collection, specifically for the stamps, normally I would just grunge them up like the samples I just showed you. But one of the things that's really important to me when I release a product is that it is usable and workable with all my other products, so that if you've bought into my line and you buy something new, it doesn't mean you have to get rid of what's old. They all build and work well together. But secondly, I always think about variety. And I think about variety because my whole notion is that when I release a product, I want it to be your product. So I don't necessarily want you to use one of my stamps, for example, and then have someone look at your art and the first thing they say, oh, that's Seth Apter's stamp. I want you to use it your way. I want you to put your own creative hand in it. So most of what I release that has a design is more about mark making. It's more about a shape. It's more about something abstract, so you can use it your way. So I decided the best way to show that is to go completely out of my typical zone. And instead of making grungy samples, I'm going to make for me, just for me, maybe not for you, but for me, what I think of as sort of clean, which is really a joke because I never do clean, crisp, bold graphic, colorful. So what I did was I got my sets of Tim Holtz Distress pencils, the watercolor pencils from Ranger, and I went to town, and that's really what I want to share with you. So I have 8 mini stamps that were just released, available now. I'm going to show you the first one, 97. Mini stamps, they are red rubber, they are cling, and you can see the size. This is pretty typical of the size. They're about a credit card size, which just gives you a really easy idea as to the size of these. And this is 97, which I think of as really my wonky swatching stamp. I have a few like this that I can swatch larger collections of colors in smaller areas. Now, lots of people have said they look like books. Lots of people say it looks like a building, and it kind of does look like a building because that's sort of my view in New York City. But what I really wanted to do was take you through my process of creating in a different way to show you the variety. So this is number 97, just stamped. This is number 97, stamped and filled with color. And again, these are Tim Holtz's watercolor distress pencils. They're not wet. I use them dry, as you can see when I get closer, so I'd have a little bit of a scratchy look, because let's be real, I'm never going to be able to be sort of clean and pure and bright and bold without throwing in some wonk and messy. I also wanted to show how if you use just a small element of this, you can create a border. So this is my border. Again, used the same way, the same process. And of course, because the nature of this release is go big or go home, I had to do one big, bold, graphic, clean, colorful. Remember, for me, might not be colorful for you, but colorful for me, background. So this is that background, full on. And you can kind of see why people thought of library books. I see sort of cathedral stained glass windows, could be the building, but from a more concrete perspective, I see it as a swatching stamp. So that's number 97. Let's go to number 98. Number 98 is a little bit more of a symbolic, grungy mark. There are 3 circles, all scratchy, with 3 X's, all scratchy. There's some extra lines, little splots and dots and splats. Very typical of my stamps. This is 98, but let's use it in a different way. Let's just stamp it. Let's add some color. And I have not yet still had a chance to make a border, but what I did was instead, I took the stamp, which is presented on the index sheet as vertical, and I stamped it vertically, and then I overstamped it horizontally so I can begin to build those layers. I love layers, you know that. So what would be next is to go diagonal, and to create a very different design here with this stamp. And then I also use some of the Distress watercolor pencils in the back to create a background. Hi, Glenda. Thanks for joining me. If you're just joining me, let me know you're here. I'd love to see who is out there. Okay, my graphic background, really happy with how this one came out. I went very vertical. I went very linear and matched, but you could definitely make this in a very wonky, more mixed up way. All right, so that is number 98. Let's go to 99. 99 really is one of my favorites from the release. It's just grunge. It's just a mad mess of marks. I mean, you might see some V shapes, you might see some triangles, you might see some blocks, but really it's just meant to be a mad mess. And if you look at B, and you look at some of these brown marks that are throughout, those are made with 99. And this is how I create. I create with the notion that if I put a stamp, see that stamp, which is why I also created what I'm doing now, sample, so you can actually see how the stamp could be used as that stamp. Thank you, Carol. So we got number 99. We got our stamp, just stamped. We have our stamp stamped with some color added. We have a border. I love this border. I love the little bits that come almost flying off the edges. Now my borders are very narrow, and in this case my border is quite even, but there is absolutely nothing stopping you from making an uneven border where your stamp goes further in or in and out, depending upon where you are. This was just one example. And then if you're going to go and use the stamp once, let's stamp more than once. Let's create something that looks like that. And then let's go big or go home with our background. These are all on what I believe are 7 by 7 inch watercolor paper. All right, let's go to 100, my friends. 100, very linear, very graphic, very cross-hatched. in most of my work, I am vertical and horizontal. I'm not always on the angle. So a lot of that can be seen in my stamps. If you look very closely here, you'll see all the extra dots here. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you, Carol, for that. So number 100, you stamp it out. Linda, it's your favorite. I love hearing that. Now, what if I presented it vertically and then overlapped horizontally? You start getting even more depth and shadow and interest. Remember, there's no reason not to stamp over a stamp that you've already stamped. It doesn't have to be perfectly placed. It gives depth, it gives shadow, it gives dimension. And when another tip is when you start stamping with the same stamp but with different colors of ink, you begin to create true depth and a lot of shadow, which also makes things look more 3D. So remember that you don't only have to stamp once. And of course, you can always fill it in with color. I love how that one looks. Again, definitely some stained glass window, cathedral window. I think that may have been in my mind because this past year I did teach in Barcelona and saw some incredible cathedral windows. How about as a border? I think that looks phenomenal personally. Love the jagged edge of the nature and how strongly it highlights whatever you place in the middle. And then go big or go home, sticking with sort of my linear theme. Because remember, you could present this in so many different ways. You could stamp your background and have them overlap to have them go in different directions, and you get a completely different look. All right, let's go to 101. 101, also one of my favorites. Just love this one. This one looks like that. I want you to notice the negative, very thin lines that are zigzagging across. As somebody said in an earlier video, and it may have been Rhonda who's watching here, she could see this as something to stitch over. Use those lines for stitching. I love that idea. For me, it's about the details. The smallest detail makes a big impression, and that little bit of line work really shows itself off either by highlighting, say, a light white background or even a grungy dark background. It will pop through. And when you color, looks like that. And what a great difference those lines make. It almost feels like a bundle. It feels 3D. It feels like it's been wrapped. Because the lines overlap each other, you really do begin to create that sense of depth. So let's just highlight that. Leave everything as is, but then just use the Distress watercolor pencils over the line. It's your favorite, Rhonda? Awesome to hear. And how about if we go bigger with color, color it in, and color in the lines? I don't know. I just think the layers make it better and better and better. Thanks, Kathy. And then let's look at the border. And I particularly made this with some gaps on purpose, just so, you know, you don't have to create a border that's uniform and goes across all four edges. You can use all these different stamps variably in a border, but you also can just stamp even just that and nothing else will add some interest to whatever you're creating. Hey, Wendy, the bamboo look. Yes, that's definitely true. I can see that. And then going big or going home, I just think this one almost has a little bit of an elegant look to it, which is not something I would normally use in my descriptions of my work. But if you look very closely, you see those white lines. And I just think that that adds such a wonderful detail. And again, I was very matched up here. You know, this is next to that, is next to that. It would have a whole different feel if these were staggered, if they were overlaid, if they were presented vertically and horizontally. And that is something that now that the release is out there, I will have some time to explore and play with. 102 has actually been one of the best sellers. I think numbers, everybody loves numbers. It's very different from all the other stamps, but it's done really, really well. I've made sure, even though it's kind of monolithic, that there's some gaps in there so that you can color them in. So here it is, just stamped. Here it is stamped, but colored in. And my favorite use of this stamp is as a border. You know what? When I was thinking border, okay, numbers off the border would be cool. It wasn't going to be my favorite border, but it turned into one of my favorite borders because when you use it as a border, it separates the even and the odd numbers. And I just think that is just so cool. Oh, Abigail, I hope it gets there tomorrow. Hey, Leslie, thank you so much. The other neat thing about this stamp, and a reminder to all, is that you don't need to even use the numbers. If you look at the tips of the stamp, and I do this a lot with my stamps, I add just little bits of lines or dots or splats so that you can be very specific and you can create a border just with that. And that may seem like, why bother? It's so little. Again, for me, the smallest detail makes the biggest difference. It elevates your work. And when you begin to take these little tiny details and build on them, you get the layers that are so necessary in mixed media. But more than that, you begin to create art that's your own. I don't think anybody who saw that in some of my work, unless they were on this video, would think, oh, that is that stamp 102. And that's what I really like, to just get it lost in the layers. Thank you, Kathy. Thanks, Abigail. So appreciate that. And this is my background. And when I did it this way, again, very linear, not overlapping at all, it just reminds me first of rulers and measuring tape, height charts. And then when I just flip it like that, it sort of reminds me of ladders and railroad tracks. And then many people mentioned it's almost like an abstracted bird on the wire, which is such a cool image. So these whole point of this release is to, and the way I'm sharing these samples, is to show you that you can do so much with it and take it in so many different directions. And really, it's up to your creativity, which you all have in spades, to take it in a direction that matches with you. My other whole notion was, I want people who think, oh, I'm not going to buy a Seth Apter stamp, that's all about the grunge, to realize that, no, it's nothing to do with grunge. It's the stamp that has to do with everything to do with the user. You can create it in any direction that works for your artistic voice. Thanks, Lily. All right, another favorite. I got a lot of favorites. This is 103. 103, in my mind, the inspiration was some old grates that were in doors that were in places like Mexico and Italy and have been around for years and have weathered. And usually these are metal and they're all rusted or broken down, maybe even some gaps. My particular favorite aspect to this not only is the gap, because it's just a little unexpected, but all those little extra dots that come off the end. So let me show you how I use 103. It's just stamped. And here it is, stamped overlapping horizontal and vertical. And as you see, you just begin to get, it's darker, there's more depth, there's more interest. And again, I am very linear, but this can be overstamped in so many different directions. Then when you color it in, I think the magic really begins. Thank you, Susie. I'm glad you tuned in as well. And I'm glad that you are inspired. What I did was highlight that gap by filling it in a little bit more with consistent color. And you know what? I actually did consciously pick that soft blue because I wanted it to be a sense that you see through it. Maybe you're seeing the sky when you look out. Hey, Shay, thank you so much. The border, loving the border. I am so big about borders. If you don't know this about my work or my thought, I love a border or a frame. I feel like it's almost a highlight, and it's almost an identifier that what's inside is important. Think about when you frame something and put it on the wall. By putting a frame around it, you're saying, look inside and I'm worthy of a frame. So putting an edge or a darker color or a shadow or a frame around all your internal details does that as well. And I left that gap there on purpose, just with a nod to the gap that is in the original stamp. And then I love my Go Big or Go Home. My intention was to spend about 3 years on this one and to fill every segment with color. But I got this far and I thought, oh, no. This actually looks amazing just with a partial color with all that white. And I'm really happy with how it came out. I'm going to share with you the backgrounds one more time at the end, in case you just joined us late, but I have to show you the last stamp now. This is 104. This was inspired by not anything specific in terms of a design, but the concept of old world exotic location tiles. And I love the curvy nature because everything here is so linear. So again, if you see the stamp, you see the stamp colored in. You see it as a border. And then you see it as a tile floor, basically. And you know what? I guess that's loosely the grout. I definitely would be fired if I was making somebody's floor, but for a little art background, I think that's okay. I want to take you through those stamps one more time, just in terms of the backgrounds. And for those of you who joined me late, I am going to show you the paints and the tissue one more time. So we have mini stamp 97. And we have our background. We have mini stamp 98 and our background. We have mini stamp, can you guess what's next? 99 and our background. We have 100 and our background. We have 101 and yes, our background. I'm just going to say it one more time. I absolutely love those negative lines. We have 102. And our background. We have 103. Only one more, I promise. And our background. And 104. And our background. All right, so if you missed the beginning, you don't want to have to go back and watch it all. We have 4 paints. They are all fresco finish acrylic paints. Thanks, Kathy. This is Kiwi Gold. This is Olive. This is Tomato. And this is Rusty on the orange side of Rust. They look very muted in the bottle. However, when you see them, because they're translucent on a white background, thanks Suzanne, we have Kiwi Gold. We have Rusty. We have Olive. And we have Tomato. As I always say, when you name your products after food, they just seem to sell well. And I think together they make a gorgeous palette, but they really, really do work well with other colors too. And then last but not least, I showed you my tissue. The first time I've had printed tissue. There are 4 sheets, 30 inches by 20 inches wide, the same design. They are all layered stamps of mine that I had released in the past with PaperArtsy, black permanent ink. When you layer with them with wet adhesive or a wet translucent paint, the white of the tissue disappears and you just get the black design. And one of the things, again, now that I have more time, that I'm excited about playing with is this notion that these are all taken from my stamps, but large in size. We supersize them for this so that I'm going to be able to use the stamp and the collage element and use them together with different scale. All right, I want to thank you all so much. Again, this is Seth Apter sharing the PaperArtsy release. These are all available right now worldwide from brick and mortar and online art and craft stores. Only select stores, though. If you need to find out, you always can message me, but your best bet is to go to PaperArtsy. It's paperartsy.co.uk, and you can look at my blog post that is currently up there. You'll see all these samples. You'll read about the inspiration, see more details, and there's a list at the bottom of the blog post of worldwide by country where it's sold. It's also available if you live in Canada or US from my online shop at sethapter.com. I so appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for the positive reaction. I look forward to seeing what you all make with it. Please, please, please. If you do make something and you post it on social media, tag me. I would love to see it. You guys have ideas that I would never in a million years think of. Also, a big thank you to Janine, who is behind the scenes here, adding a lot of info, links, and just goodwill to the live chat. Thank you guys so much. Be well, and I look forward to seeing you real soon, actually, back on YouTube. Stay tuned. Bye.